20 years after being thrown out on Father's Day, Sarah stepped onto the cracked driveway where she'd once been destroyed. The man who screamed, "You are not my daughter," now stood trembling, holding a foreclosure notice. Frank didn't recognize this confident businesswoman until she removed her sunglasses. "Hello, Frank. I'm here to buy your ranch for $2.8 million. His knees buckled. The scared girl he'd cast aside had returned with the power to save or ruin him. But would she choose mercy or revenge? What she decided would prove that wounds, when healed right, become miracles. The morning sun was blazing hot that Father's Day in 2004, and Sarah Martinez could already feel the tension crackling through their small house like electricity before a storm. At 16, she'd learned to read the signs, the way her stepfather Frank's jaw tightened when he drank his coffee, the way her mother Anna kept wiping the same spot on the counter over and over again. "Sarah, honey, maybe you should go visit your friend Jessica today," her mother whispered, not looking up from those dishes she'd been washing for the third time. But Sarah was stubborn, always had been. "It's Father's Day, Mom. I made him a card." The card sat there on the kitchen table, all crooked letters and heart stickers. She'd worked on it for hours last night, trying so hard to find the right words for a man who'd never really felt like her father. That's when Frank stomped into the kitchen, still in yesterday's clothes, reeking of beer and disappointment. His eyes landed on that card, and something ugly twisted across his face. "What's this supposed to be?" he growled, picking it up with 2 fingers like it was garbage. I made it for you, Frank, for Father's Day." The silence stretched between them like a tightrope ready to snap. Anna's hands froze in the soapy water. Frank's voice came out low and mean. "Father's Day? You think I'm your father?" Sarah's heart started hammering against her ribs. You raised me since I was little." "Raised you?" Frank's laugh was bitter as black coffee. "You want to know something, girl? You ain't nothing to me. You never were." The words hit Sarah like a slap. Her mother spun around, eyes wide with panic. "Frank, don't..." But he was already on a roll. 16 years of buried resentment pouring out like poison. "You think I don't know? You think I'm some kind of fool? I've been carrying another man's burden all these years, and for what?" Sarah felt the ground shifting under her feet. "What are you talking about?" Frank threw the card down, and it fluttered to the floor like a wounded bird. "Your real daddy, sweetheart, ain't here. He ain't never been here, and you know what? You are not my daughter." The words exploded across the kitchen, so loud the neighbors probably heard them 3 houses down. Sarah's world tilted sideways. Everything she thought she knew about her life just crumbled like a house made of cards. Her mother started crying, those deep, broken sobs that come from somewhere way down in your soul. "Frank, please, she's just a child that ain't mine." His voice was getting louder, angrier. "I'm done pretending. I'm done with this whole lie." Sarah stood there frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks, watching her family fall apart right in front of her eyes. The card lay on the linoleum floor, one corner torn, those heart stickers looking silly and childish now. What happened next would echo through the neighborhood for weeks, but for Sarah, it was the moment her whole world ended, and the beginning of a journey she never could have imagined. Now listen, y'all need to understand how this whole mess started, because what happened that Father's Day didn't come out of nowhere. No, sir. It had been brewing for 16 long years. See, back when Sarah was just a baby, Frank had been going through Anna's old jewelry box, looking for something to pawn, truth be told, when he found them letters. Letters tied up with a faded blue ribbon, written in a man's handwriting. A man named Robert Whitmore. Frank's hands shook as he read those words of love, promises of marriage, dreams of a future that never came to pass. Robert wrote about how much he loved Anna, how he couldn't wait to meet their baby girl, how he was going to give them both the world, but Robert never got that chance. The last letter was from Anna to Robert, never sent, telling him about Sarah's birth. At the bottom, someone had scrawled, "Died in car accident, June 12, 1987. Frank felt his world crumble. This man, this Robert, he'd been rich, educated, everything Frank wasn't. And Sarah, his little girl who called him Daddy, she wasn't his at all. She was the daughter of a man who could have given Anna everything Frank never could. That night, while Anna slept and baby Sarah cooed in her crib, Frank took those letters out to the backyard and burned them, watching the smoke curl up into the darkness. He swore he'd never tell a soul, but Lord help him, he couldn't forget. Every time Sarah laughed, every time she reached for him with those tiny hands, Frank saw Robert's ghost in her smile. The love he tried to feel got twisted up with jealousy and pain year after year, until it turned into something cold and bitter. Anna knew something was wrong, but she was too scared to ask. She'd seen Frank's face change that night when he found those letters, seen how he looked at Sarah differently after that. But she stayed quiet, hoping time would heal whatever was broken between them. Years passed. Sarah grew up walking on eggshells, never understanding why Frank's love felt so conditional, so angry. Every birthday, every Father's Day, every family moment carried the weight of that buried secret. Then came that awful Sunday in 2004, when 16 years of hidden resentment finally exploded, after Frank screamed those words, "You are not my daughter," and threw her suitcase onto the porch. Sarah stood there in shock, watching her world crumble. The neighbors whispered behind their curtains. Anna cried in the kitchen. And Sarah? She picked up that suitcase, looked back at the only home she'd ever known, and walked away into a future she couldn't imagine. The first night she slept at Jessica's house, but Jessica's mama made it clear she couldn't stay long. "We ain't got room for another mouth to feed, honey." By the end of that first week, Sarah was sleeping in the downtown shelter, learning that the world was a lot colder than she'd ever imagined. But someone was watching her struggle, someone who carried a secret that would change everything. The first night on the streets, Sarah learned what real cold felt like, not the kind you get from forgetting your jacket. No, this was the cold that seeps into your bones and stays there, reminding you that the world don't owe you nothing. She'd been sleeping in the downtown shelter for 3 weeks now, her old suitcase tucked under her cot like a pillow. The other women there had stories that'd break your heart. Women who'd lost everything, women who'd been thrown away just like she had. But Sarah was the youngest, and that made her a target. "You better learn fast, honey," said Margaret, an older woman with kind eyes and calloused hands. "This world's gonna chew you up if you don't get tough quick." Sarah tried. Lord knows she tried. She'd walk the streets every morning, going store to store, asking if they needed help. Most folks took one look at her. 16, no experience, no references, and shook their heads before she could even finish talking. "Sorry, sweetie, but we need someone with experience," they'd say, not meeting her eyes. By afternoon, her feet would be screaming in those old shoes, and her stomach would be growling like a wild animal. The free meal at the shelter came at 6, but pride's a funny thing. Even when you're starving, it still hurts to stand in that line. But someone was watching Sarah's struggle, someone who understood her pain in ways she couldn't imagine. Mrs. Helen Torres finished mopping the floors at Riverside Office Building every night around midnight. She'd been cleaning these same offices for 15 years, invisible to the fancy people who worked there during the day. But Helen had sharp eyes, and she'd noticed the young girl who sometimes slept in the doorway of the building across the street. Something about Sarah reminded Helen of her own daughter, Maria, who died so young. Maria had been 17 when she got pregnant, and the boy who'd promised to love her forever disappeared the minute he heard the news. Maria had died in childbirth, alone and scared, and Helen had never forgiven herself for not being there. Now, watching Sarah struggle, Helen saw a second chance, a way to do for this girl what she hadn't been able to do for Maria. "Excuse me, honey," Helen called out one night, as Sarah huddled in that doorway. "You hungry?" Sarah looked up, wary as a stray cat. In this neighborhood, kindness usually came with a price. But Helen's smile was genuine, and she was holding out a paper bag. "Got some leftover sandwiches from my cleaning job. They're just gonna throw them away anyway." That first sandwich tasted like heaven. Sarah tried not to cry as she ate, but Helen saw those tears anyway. "What's your name, child?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Well, Sarah, my name's Helen, and I got a feeling you and me are gonna help each other out." What Helen didn't tell her that night was how her heart had nearly stopped when she heard that name, Sarah. The same name she'd heard whispered in the Whitmore house all those years ago, the name of the granddaughter they'd never found. But Helen was a careful woman. She'd wait, watch, and when the time was right, she'd reveal the secret that would change everything. For 3 weeks, Helen brought Sarah food, small talk, and something the girl hadn't felt in months, kindness, without strings attached. Sarah started looking forward to those midnight conversations, the way Helen's eyes crinkled when she smiled, the gentle way she never asked too many questions. But tonight felt different. Helen seemed nervous, fidgeting with something in her cleaning cart. "Sarah, honey, I got something I need to tell you. Something that's gonna sound impossible, but I swear on my Maria's memory, every word is true." Sarah's heart started racing. In her experience, conversations that started like this never ended well. "You remember telling me your mama's name was Anna Martinez?" "Yes, ma'am, but her maiden name was Rodriguez." Helen's breath caught. "Child, sit down, please." Sarah perched on the edge of the concrete steps, watching Helen pull out a worn leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. For 30 years, I worked for the Whitmore family, richest folks in the county. Had one son, Robert, sweetest boy you ever saw, always treated me like family, not just hired help. Sarah's stomach knotted. Something in Helen's voice made her feel like her world was about to shift again. Robert died in a car crash back in 1987. He was only 22. Helen's voice got soft, remembering. But before he died, he kept this journal. Wrote about everything, his dreams, his plans, and most of all, about a girl he loved more than life itself. Helen opened the journal, and Sarah could see pages covered in neat handwriting. Her name was Anna Rodriguez. He wrote about how they met, how she made him laugh, how he was going to marry her and give her the world. Look here. Helen pointed to a page, and Sarah's heart nearly stopped. There in Robert's handwriting, Anna's pregnant, I'm going to be a father. We'll get married next month, I already picked out the ring. Our little girl is going to have everything. Love, security, a real family. Sarah's hands started shaking. That can't be about my mama. Robert died 2 weeks before you were born, Sarah. Anna was so heartbroken, so scared, she just disappeared. The Whitmores tried everything to find her, hired investigators, put ads in papers, searched for years. The world was spinning. Sarah gripped the concrete steps so hard her knuckles went white. You're saying that Robert Whitmore was your daddy, child, and those people been looking for you your whole life. Helen pulled out a faded photograph, a young man with kind eyes and Sarah's exact smile. They never stopped hoping. Every year on your birthday, they light a candle and pray their granddaughter is safe somewhere. Sarah stared at the picture, seeing her own face looking back at her. The nose, the curve of her lips, even the way one eyebrow sat higher than the other. Why didn't you tell them? Why didn't you tell me? Helen's eyes filled with tears. Your mama begged me to keep her secret. She was young, scared, afraid they'd try to take you away. But watching you struggle now, knowing they're still searching, I can't keep this buried anymore. The journal trembled in Sarah's hands. Everything she thought she knew about herself was a lie. Frank wasn't her real father, but somewhere out there a family had been grieving for her, searching for her, loving her from a distance for 16 years. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. She lay on her cot at the shelter, staring at Robert's journal until her eyes burned. Every page was filled with dreams about a future that never came, dreams about her. My Anna is carrying our miracle, one entry read. I'm going to teach our little one to ride horses, to love books, to never be afraid of dreaming big. Helen had promised to take her to meet the Whitmores the next evening, but first, she needed to confess something that had been eating at her for 17 years. Sarah, I need you to understand what your mama went through, Helen said as they sat in the diner the next morning. When Robert died, Anna was 6 months pregnant and scared out of her mind. Helen's coffee grew cold as she remembered. The Whitmores came looking for her right after the funeral. They knew Robert had been seeing someone, knew it was serious. But Anna panicked. Why? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. They were rich, powerful. She was just a young girl from the wrong side of town. She thought they'd take you away. Say she wasn't good enough to raise a Whitmore child. Helen's hands trembled as she continued. So when the investigators came asking questions, when they showed up at the hospital, when they knocked on doors, I lied for her, told them I never heard of any Anna Rodriguez, sent them chasing shadows. Sarah felt sick. You mean they really tried to find us? Honey, they never stopped trying. Every year they'd hire new investigators, put ads in papers across 3 states, even offered a reward, $50,000 for any information about Anna or their granddaughter. The weight of those lost years hit Sarah like a truck. While she'd been growing up with Frank's cruelty, thinking she was unwanted, unloved, her real grandparents had been searching for her. Mrs. Dorothy and Mr. Edward Whitmore, Helen whispered. They're getting older now, but they never gave up hope. Every birthday, your birthday, they'd put flowers on Robert's grave and pray their granddaughter was safe somewhere. Sarah's heart broke thinking about these people who'd loved her from a distance, never knowing if she even existed. There's more, child. Something I ain't told you yet. Helen pulled out a newspaper clipping from 2003. The headline read, Whitmore fortune awaits missing heir. Robert was their only child. When he died, they couldn't bear to think about what would happen to the family business, the ranch, everything Robert was supposed to inherit. So they set up a trust. Everything's been waiting for you, Sarah. The whole fortune. Sarah's head spun. What do you mean, everything? The ranch, the business investments, the bank accounts, millions of dollars, all legally yours the minute they can prove you're Robert's daughter. The girl who'd been sleeping in doorways, who'd been told she was nothing, who'd been thrown away like trash, was suddenly the heir to a fortune. But the hardest part wasn't the money. It was knowing that somewhere out there, two heartbroken grandparents had been loving her, missing her, hoping for her, while she'd spent 16 years believing she was unloved and unwanted. Tonight, Helen would take her home. Tonight, Sarah would finally meet the family that never stopped looking for her. But first, she had to find the courage to walk through those doors and into a life she never dared dream possible. The Whitmore estate sat behind tall iron gates like something from a movie, white columns, sprawling lawns, and windows that seemed to watch your every move. Sarah's hands wouldn't stop shaking as Helen rang the doorbell. "What if they don't believe me? What if I'm not what they hoped for?" Sarah whispered. "Child, you're their blood, that's all that matters." When the door opened, Sarah found herself face to face with an elegant woman in her 70s. Mrs. Dorothy Whitmore had silver hair and kind eyes that filled with tears the moment she saw Sarah's face. "Oh, my lord," Dorothy breathed. "Edward, come quickly. She looks just like him." Mr. Edward Whitmore appeared, a tall man with gentle hands and Robert's same smile. He stared at Sarah for a long moment, then his voice cracked. "You have his eyes, sweetheart. You have our Robert's eyes." The DNA test took 3 weeks, the longest 3 weeks of Sarah's life. Helen let her stay in her small apartment, but Sarah barely slept, barely ate. What if she was wrong? What if this was all some cruel mistake? When Dr. Peterson called with the results, Sarah's heart nearly stopped. "Sarah, the test confirms it. You are definitely Robert Whitmore's biological daughter." That evening, when she walked back into the Whitmore house, Dorothy collapsed into sobs. "Forgive us, darling. Forgive us for not finding you sooner." They showed her photo albums filled with pictures of Robert, as a baby, a little boy learning to ride horses, graduating college, always smiling. "He would have loved you so much," Edward said, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. But then came another shock. But then came another revelation that left them all stunned. "Sarah," Dorothy said carefully, "during our 20 years of searching, we discovered something else. Robert, he had been involved with another young woman before he met your mother, a girl named Linda from Jefferson County." Edward pulled out another photograph. She had his son, a boy named Charles, about 4 years older than you. Linda raised him alone after Robert died, but Charles has been searching for his father's family since he turned 18. Sarah stared at the photo of a young man with Robert's strong jaw and kind eyes. "We've been in contact with him for 3 years now," Dorothy continued. "We did DNA tests. He's definitely Robert's son, but he knew about you too, Sarah. Robert had told Linda about Anna before things ended between them. Linda was understanding," Edward explained. "She knew Robert loved your mother more than anything. Charles grew up knowing he had a half-sister out there somewhere. He's been helping us search for you." When Charles walked through that door 3 days later, Sarah saw another piece of Robert's face looking back at her. He was tall, 21, with their father's dark hair and gentle way of speaking. "I can't believe it," Charles said, pulling Sarah into a hug that felt like coming home. "I always knew I had family out there somewhere. I just never stopped believing." But with this joy came crushing responsibility. The Whitmores were aging. The business needed young leadership. And suddenly Sarah wasn't just finding a family, she was inheriting the weight of keeping it all together. "The ranch, the investments, the foundation your father wanted to start," Edward explained. "It's all yours now, both of you. But Sarah, as Robert's firstborn, the final decisions will be yours." Sarah looked around at these people who'd welcomed her with such love, at Charles who'd become the brother she'd always dreamed of, at the legacy waiting for her. How could a girl who'd been sleeping in shelters just months ago suddenly be responsible for healing a family and managing a fortune? The weight of it all felt crushing, but for the first time in her life she wasn't carrying it alone. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but Lord have mercy, it was something to witness. Sarah threw herself into learning the Whitmore business, like her life depended on it, and maybe it did. Every morning at 5, she'd meet Edward at the stables, learning how to read the land, understand cattle prices, manage the ranch hands. Her soft city hands got calloused and strong. Her voice, once timid and uncertain, began carrying the authority that comes from knowing your place in the world. "You got your daddy's instincts," Edward told her one day, watching her negotiate with a difficult supplier. "Robert could read people like an open book, so can you." Charles became her anchor through it all. When the business courses made her head spin with numbers and legal terms, He'd sit with her at the kitchen table until midnight, explaining everything twice if he had to. "We're family now," he'd say. "Real family doesn't give up on each other." But the hardest part wasn't learning the business. It was learning to believe she deserved it. Years of Frank's cruelty had left marks deeper than any scar. Every time someone called her Miss Whitmore, every time she had to make a big decision, that voice in her head whispered, "You're nothing, you don't belong here." Dorothy saw the struggle and pulled her aside one evening. "Sweetheart, I know this is overwhelming, but you got to understand, this money, this land, this legacy, it was always meant for you." Robert dreamed of passing it to his children. By winter, Sarah was handling major ranch decisions. She reorganized the employee schedules, found ways to cut costs without cutting jobs, and even started planning the youth foundation Robert had dreamed of creating. But while Sarah was building her new life, her old world was crumbling. Back in town, Frank's farm was falling apart. The drought had killed half his crops, the bank was threatening foreclosure, and the cattle were getting sick from contaminated water. Anna watched her husband, the man who'd thrown their daughter away, struggling to save what little they had left. "Maybe we should call Sarah," Anna suggested one night, her voice barely a whisper. Frank's pride was still too strong. "That girl ain't our problem anymore. I made my choice." But pride don't pay bills, and the debt collectors weren't going to wait much longer. Frank was about to learn that the seeds of cruelty you plant have a way of growing into a harvest of consequences, and Sarah, the girl he'd called worthless, was about to become the only person with the power to save him, if she chose to. The phone call that would change everything was just days away, and neither Frank nor Sarah was ready for what was coming. Sometimes the Lord works in ways that humble us all, bringing us face to face with our choices when we least expect it. But would Sarah choose mercy or justice when her past came knocking? That choice would define not just her character, but the kind of woman she was becoming. The phone rang at 7 in the morning, jarring Sarah from her sleep in her new bedroom at the Whitmore estate. She almost didn't recognize her mother's voice. Anna sounded older, broken, like she'd been crying for days. "Sarah, baby, is that really you?" Sarah's heart clenched. Despite everything, hearing her mama's voice brought back every memory of bedtime stories and gentle hugs before Frank's cruelty poisoned their home. "Mama, how did you get this number?" "Helen told me where you were. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything, for not protecting you, for not telling you the truth about your real daddy. I was young and scared and I made terrible choices." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling 17 years of hurt washing over her. "Why are you calling now, Mama?" The silence stretched long enough to break hearts. When Anna finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "We're gonna lose everything, baby. The farm, the house, everything. Frank, he's sick with worry. The bank's foreclosing next month, and nobody wants to buy land that's been ruined by drought and disease." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What does that have to do with me? The only company with enough money to buy us out is the Whitmore Company. Frank don't know who you are now, don't know what you've become. He just knows they're the biggest landowners in the county." The irony was sharp as a knife. The man who'd thrown her away, who'd screamed that she was nothing to him, now needed the very company she was heir to. "Sarah, I know I got no right to ask, but could you maybe put in a good word? Help us get a fair price?" Sarah stared out her bedroom window at the rolling hills of Whitmore land, thinking about Frank's face the day he'd thrown her suitcase on the porch. Those words still echoed in her nightmares. "You are not my daughter." "Does he know who I am now?" Sarah asked. "No, baby. He thinks you're still... He don't know about your real family." Charles knocked on her door just as Sarah was hanging up. He took one look at her face and sat down beside her. "What's wrong?" Sarah told him everything. About the call, about Frank's failing farm, about the cruel irony that he needed help from the very company that now belonged to her. "What are you gonna do?" Charles asked gently. Sarah stared at her hands that had been calloused by work, strengthened by struggle, and were now capable of signing checks that could save or destroy Frank's world. "I don't know," she whispered. "Part of me wants to let him lose everything. Let him know what it feels like to be thrown away." But even as she said it, Sarah knew that wasn't who she wanted to be. The question was, could she find the strength to be better than the man who'd raised her? The answer would come sooner than she thought. Sarah spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with the decision that would define who she was gonna become. The Whitmore estate felt too quiet, too peaceful for the storm raging in her heart. Dorothy found her sitting by Robert's portrait at 2 in the morning, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Grandmother, how do I forgive someone who broke me? How do I help the man who threw me away like trash?" Dorothy sat beside her, taking her trembling hands. Honey, forgiveness ain't about what Frank deserves. It's about who you choose to be. Your daddy Robert, he had the biggest heart I ever knew. He would have chosen mercy. Charles knocked softly, bringing hot coffee and sitting on her other side. Whatever you decide, I'm with you, but remember, you got the power now. That's gotta count for something. The next morning, Anna called again, her voice desperate. Sarah, Frank's in the hospital. The stress gave him a heart attack. He's gonna die thinking he lost everything. Mama, Sarah said quietly, I need you to tell me the truth, all of it. Why didn't you ever tell me about Robert? Anna's sob came through the phone like a physical blow. I was 17, pregnant and terrified. When Robert died, his parents came looking, but I was so scared they'd think I was after their money, that they'd take you away from me. So I ran. I married Frank thinking it would give you stability, but he could never love what reminded him that I'd loved someone else first. Did you love my real father? With everything I had, Robert was gentle, kind, full of dreams. He would have loved you so much, baby. I was wrong to keep that from you. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 16 years of lies finally lifting. That afternoon, she drove to Frank's failing farm, all 800 acres of what had once been prime agricultural land. The Whitmore appraisers had valued it at $8 million due to its size and development potential, but Frank owed nearly that much to various creditors. She walked to the front porch where he'd thrown her suitcase, where he'd screamed those words that still haunted her dreams. But now, instead of feeling small and worthless, she felt something else. Pity for a man who'd let his pain turn him cruel. When she walked into the hospital room 2 hours later, Frank was awake but looked broken. The moment he saw her, tears started streaming down his weathered face. Sarah? Oh God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I've been praying you'd forgive me someday. His voice was weak, filled with genuine remorse. I know I got no right to ask, but I've been thinking about what I'd done to you every day since you left. Frank's hands trembled as he continued. I found out about your real daddy when you was just a baby, and it ate me up inside, made me cruel, made me hurt the one person who didn't deserve it. Frank, she said quietly, I know about Robert Whitmore. I know about everything. His eyes widened. You know? I'm Robert Whitmore's daughter, Frank. I'm part of the family that owns half this county now. The Whitmore Company is my company. I'm here because my company is going to buy your farm. We'll pay fair market value, enough to cover your debts and give you a fresh start. Frank's face crumpled. Your company? I don't understand. The Whitmore Company. I'm Robert Whitmore's daughter, Frank. I'm the granddaughter of the richest family in the county. The girl you said was nothing. She's everything you need right now. The heart monitor started beeping faster as the truth sank in. But I'm not just going to buy your farm, Sarah continued, her voice steady and strong. I'm going to turn it into something beautiful. A place where kids who've been thrown away can find hope. And Frank, I'm going to offer you a job there if you want it. A chance to help instead of hurt. Frank started crying then. Deep, broken sobs from a man who'd just discovered that grace sometimes comes from the very people we've wounded most. 2 years later, Sarah stood in the same yard where she'd once been broken, but everything had changed. After purchasing Frank's 800-acre property for $8 million, she'd transformed it into the Robert Whitmore Institute, dormitories where rejected kids found safety, classrooms where they learned skills, gardens where they grew hope alongside vegetables. The old farmhouse had become the main office, painted bright yellow like sunshine after rain. Where Frank had once screamed his cruelty, counselors now offered gentle guidance to teenagers who'd been thrown away by their families. Sarah walked through the halls every morning, greeting kids who reminded her of herself, angry, hurt, but still fighting to believe they mattered. There was Maria, 15, whose parents kicked her out for getting pregnant. There was David, 17, whose dad couldn't accept that his son was different. Each face told a story of rejection that Sarah knew by heart. Miss Sarah, called out Jenny, a 16-year-old with trust issues and a brilliant mind for computers. The new kids are here. Sarah smiled, watching a van pull up with 5 more teenagers who'd lost their families, but were about to find something better. A place where being unwanted elsewhere made them precious here. Charles had become the Institute's co-director, his business degree and kind heart making him perfect for managing the daily operations. He'd married his college sweetheart Linda last spring, and they were expecting their first child, a baby who'd grow up knowing love was bigger than blood. Helen, now 73, had become the Institute's beloved grandmother. The kids called her Mama Helen, and she spoiled them with homemade cookies and stories about never giving up on your dreams. Anna visited twice a week now, working as a volunteer counselor. Her own pain had taught her how to recognize when kids were hiding hurt behind anger. "I failed my own daughter once," she told Sarah quietly. "I won't fail these children." But the most remarkable transformation belonged to Frank. He'd accepted Sarah's job offer with tears streaming down his weathered face. For 2 years now, he'd been the Institute's head groundskeeper, tending the gardens with hands that had learned gentleness. The kids trusted him because broken people recognize healing when they see it. "Frank's different now," Helen told Sarah one evening as they watched him teaching some teenagers how to repair a fence. "He's found his purpose." Sarah nodded. Frank would never be her father. That honor belonged to Robert's memory, but he'd become something maybe better, a man who'd learned that redemption was possible, even for hearts that had forgotten how to love. The Institute had helped over 200 young people in just 2 years. Some went to college, some learned trades, some just learned to believe they deserved happiness. All of them learned what Sarah had discovered, that the family you choose can heal the wounds left by the family you were born into. Standing in her office that evening, Sarah looked at Robert's journal, now framed on her wall. His dreams of helping people had become reality through her hands, proving that love doesn't die with the person who gave it. It just finds new ways to grow. Anna visited every month now, their relationship slowly healing. "I'm so proud of who you've become," she'd told Sarah last visit. "Your daddy Robert would be too." As the sun set over the Institute, painting the sky the colors of hope, Sarah realized something beautiful. The girl who'd been rejected on Father's Day hadn't just inherited a fortune. She'd built an empire of love that would outlast any amount of money. Sometimes the deepest wounds become the source of the greatest healing. And sometimes the people who throw us away are really setting us free to find out who we were always meant to be. This story shows us that sometimes our greatest pain becomes the source of our deepest purpose. Sarah could have chosen revenge, but instead she chose to build something beautiful from her brokenness. She proved that being rejected doesn't define your worth. It can actually reveal your strength. Think about the moments in your own life when you felt thrown away, overlooked, or told you weren't enough. What if those weren't endings but beginnings? What if your pain was preparing you for a purpose you haven't discovered yet? Here's what I want you to ask yourself right now. What rejection in your life might actually be redirecting you towards something better? How could your deepest wound become your greatest source of healing for others? What would you do if you discovered you had more power to change your story than you ever imagined? Sarah's transformation didn't happen overnight, and yours won't either. But it can start today with one simple decision: to stop letting other people's rejection write the final chapter of your story. Don't let this be just another story you heard. Let it be the spark that changes everything. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss these life-changing stories. And click on the video appearing on your screen right now to continue watching more incredible journeys of transformation that will inspire you to rewrite your own story. Your best chapter is still waiting to be written. What are you going to do about it?